Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Crystal, just in case you're new here, and today I'm here to tell you why you should be reading Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix is an amazing horror author, horror/comedy author. He also is a screenplay writer for many horror movies that are coming out to date. His most recent one is Satanic Panic, and you can catch that one on Shudder if you are interested. If you are someone who has read Grady Hendrix in the past, if you watch Satanic Panic, you will be like, wow, yes. He wrote that. It's such a mirror to his writing of books. He always goes to a very horrific point, but then he follows up with comedy, and that's what makes his work so authentic, so original, and so interesting to me. I am such a fangirl of his works. I will always purchase his books. The only book that I don't have is Paperbacks from Hell, which I will probably order that as soon as possible. But that is Grady Hendrix's first book. His first dabble in published writing was writing a book about published books in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that pretty much was the forefront of the horror genre. If you're someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s like myself, you've heard of point horror. It's been in our libraries growing up, in our local bookstores. It was like a phase where everyone was purchasing these books because horror was so accessible at the time. And I myself, as a young preteen, found myself gravitating towards those books, especially like Christopher Pike books. Those were really famous point horror books. Some of R.L. Stein's works, like The Boyfriend and the Girlfriend, those were point horror books as well. So there was definitely a lot of stuff out there, a lot of weird stuff out there, and it was so accessible at the time. So Grady Hendrix had written this official, unofficial book about the history and the backstory of the point horror books. I mean, there's just so many to date. You could look them up yourself or purchase Paperbacks from Hell. But it's definitely part of my childhood, the point horror, and the fact that he has researched so much of it, and it's a foundation for his writing. You could tell that his research for his books comes from that point of time and the point horror books. So definitely check out Paperbacks from Hell if you're someone who's interested in the horror genre from the past, and also if you're someone who lived it like I did, like my cousins did who are older than me, they like them too. So if you're someone who is into that, definitely check out that book. Another reason you should be reading Grady Hendrix is this book right here, Horror Store. Now, if you look at this book, it looks like a magazine for IKEA, right? But if you look a little closer, there's ghosts in this book. And if you look at the back, pretty cool. This is the coolest book I own, I think. I mean, all of Grady Hendrix books are the coolest, but this book has some amazing illustrations. You feel like you're reading a manual. I'll show you. Isn't that cute? My little bookmark from Stranger Dream. I can't speak. It's literally like reading like a manual and like how to build furniture from IKEA. It's pretty crazy. It's awesome. So it's a ghost story of this haunted IKEA-like place. And these kids, they end up doing like this overnight shift. And some of the kids that have worked there are there doing like ghost hunting, like ghost adventures, and filming that, and spooky things start happening, and it's just pretty awesome. The writing is perfect. The banter, the conversation between characters is great. Every character is a little different from each other, so that's pretty awesome as well. And I really, really enjoyed this book so much. It's definitely what drew me into Grady Hendrix books. This was the first fiction book that he published with Quirk, and just hit myself in the face with quirk, and it's phenomenal. What they did with this book, I haven't seen anything like it. And the cover is just as interesting as the story inside of it. His writing is so authentic and different than most horror authors out there. And if you're like me and love that campy feel where kind of like the slasher films and a lot of the films from the 90s, that campy horror, you're gonna love his books, especially this one, and especially My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is up next. So the next Grady Hendrix book I have here is My Best Friend's Exorcism. Now, I've talked a lot about this book on my channel. As you know, I love this cover, and I'm sure most of you guys love this cover as well. It is like an old VHS cassette tape, which is very nostalgic to my childhood. Going to Blockbuster and picking out, you know, the scariest horror film you could find and watch it while under the covers in your room. It was the best thing ever. So this book kind of revisits that part of my life, and it's about these two friends, these two girls who are sophomores in high school who just kind of don't fit in, so they end up kind of clicking with each other because they had no friends elsewhere. And they're hanging out by the lake one night, and all of a sudden one of the girls just becomes possessed, or what we think is possessed. And crazy things start happening, and it is that perfect campy horror book where there are horrific things that happen in here, just like in The Exorcist. Terrifying things, but he follows up with that comedy, and it just makes it perfect. It's the perfect blend, and he knows how to write the perfect blend. It's not straight horror the entire time. The characters are super quirky and enjoyable to read, and you just get attached to the story. His books are stories that stick with you and you remember them. I can't even tell you how many books I've read and I've enjoyed them, but if I think back on them, I'm like, what was that about? But his books, I know beginning to end, it's still in my mind, almost like watching a movie. It's just, that's how it plays out. Then his next book is We Sold Our Souls, and this book takes a darker dive into the horror genre. This definitely takes a darker dive into the psychological effects, and the title is We Sold Our Souls. So there's a lot of, I want to say like shadow self stuff going on in here. And there's cult stuff in here. It also has to do with rock and roll. It's a pretty awesome book, and I read it in one sitting, and it's like a decent amount of pages, but it's one of those books that you open up, you start reading, and you're just like, okay, like this is how my day's gonna go. I need to cancel everything and just read this book. So highly recommend this one as well. This is definitely a darker take on things. There's still that comedy that he throws in there, but not so much of it. It's definitely a little bit different than Horror Store and My Best Friend's Exorcism. This is definitely more of an adult story. Not that those two stories aren't adult books, because all of his books are adult books, but Horror Store and My Best Friend's Exorcism could fit into the young adult genre if there wasn't, you know, a lot of curse words and super gore in it. But this definitely is a little bit more adult. And there are, like, the cover kind of reminds me of Tenacious D. I don't know if you guys are Tenacious D fans or Tanakh, you know, but I am a huge Tenacious D fan. Jack Black, I love him so much. So this kind of remind me a little bit of the story of Tenacious D. I wonder if Grady Hendrix is a Tenacious D fan too. Have to ask if there's a way to ask. But I highly recommend this one as well. I don't recommend starting with this one. I recommend reading Horror Store or definitely My Best Friend's Exorcism. See if you like his writing and his work and the way he does his characters, and then pick this one up. And then finally, the reason being for this video, the release of Grady Hendrix's fourth novel, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I have been waiting for this book to come out when I first heard that he was writing a book about vampires, I want to say in 2018. I have been checking my Goodreads like crazy, trying to find out when this book was coming out, and when I found out it was supposed to come out in October of 2020, they pushed up the date and it came out this week. So congratulations, Grady, on your fourth published novel through Quirk. It is gorgeous and I can't wait to read it. I have not read this yet, so I can't give you a full review just yet, but I will. But I am here to promote this book, and if you are someone who is looking for vampires, here you go. This is revisiting again that nostalgic part of myself where I loved vampires growing up. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, my favorite TV show of all time, and anything that had to do with vampires, I watched Angel, even like Supernatural, like all those shows growing up that were there that had that supernatural aspect to them, always had vampires lurking, and it was just part of 90s kids' lives. So I'm happy that this is kind of gonna start coming back. We need more vampire stories out there. Those were the classic stories, they were the best stories, and Grady Hendrix is here with a new, fresh, original take on it. The setting of this book is actually taking place in the same location as my best friend's exorcism. It's the same exact town. I'm sure we'll see some characters pop up again, but this is just, I don't know if he's trying to be a little similar to Stephen King in that aspect where he writes in the same town, but this town is actually his real hometown that he's writing about. So it's pretty cool. And Grady Hendrix just knows how to write a good book. So if you've read my best friend's exorcism, definitely pick this book up, especially if you loved it. I have a feeling this is going to be, not that it's going to be better, but it's literally going to be side by side with that. So if you need any other reasons to pick up Grady Hendrix books, please let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, I think I made myself pretty clear. His books are so original, they're so authentic, they're different, they should be movies, and I believe Horror Store is being optioned for a TV series, so that'll be really interesting when that comes out, and I can't wait to see it on the screen. But he is a screenplay writer, so his books do have that imagery of a movie when you're reading them. He really has a way of setting the atmosphere and the tone of his books. And like I said, they're dark, they're horror, but they have that comedy thrown in there that makes it so much fun to read. And they look so cool on the shelves. I mean, the covers are so different than anything that's out there. So these are books that I would say are okay to purchase. Definitely pick them up so you can own them yourselves. And I can't wait to get into the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I can't wait to see how this plays out. I believe it's like a bunch of housewives that end up having to slay vampires. So it sounds really fun, super gory. I read the first page and it says like it starts in blood, and it starts in blood, it ends in blood. I'm excited. So if you're a horror fan and you haven't picked up any of Grady Hendrix books yet, I suggest you do it right now. We're in a quarantine anyway, so what are you doing? Pick up a Grady Hendrix book, read it, enjoy it, let me know what you think. But that is all I have for you guys today. So if you like this video and you want to see more author videos from me, please just like and subscribe down below, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Bye!